I know you're watching very closely what is happening militarily. I want to talk about chiefly the capital, or at least to begin, the capital. The latest word out of Kiev and around the surrounding areas, the mayor saying, the president saying, that Ukrainian forces are actually retaking territory in the area around Kiev, including that key suburb of Irpin, through counterattacks. And I'm wondering the significance of that. What are you seeing now from Ukrainian forces?
Right. So what we should look at it from a slightly larger perspective, I think, because late last week, the Russian MOD stated that they concluded the first part of the operation, and now they would focus mostly on securing the Donbas area. And what this probably means is that, the Russian combat potential and its capability to launch offensives has been totally exhausted, and they are probably hedging their future actions. By that I mean, any gains that Ukrainians will now make will be presented in a way by the Russian MOD that, look, it was only about Donbas from the start, and we are slowly pulling out, and that was the goal from the very beginning, which is obviously not true, because when Russia entered the war in late February, the goal was to change the regime and occupy, if not the entire country, then at least a very major part of it. Now, the fact that Russians are pulling back presents a great opportunity for Ukraine to conduct limited tactical counteroffensives. And what we are seeing now around Kiev and elsewhere is this opportunity being taken by Ukrainians to try to retake what was previously lost and benefit on general Russian weaknesses in certain areas.
Well, okay, you've raised a couple of points, both of which I'd like to ask you about. But when you say Russian weaknesses in certain areas, I'm wondering how you would assess Russia's military progress at this moment. Hearing one of the headlines, for example, that the war effort is going to require 1,000 private mercenaries now moving into the east because Russia is suffering such heavy losses. What do you think is the status of Russia's fight right now?
Well, I mean, 1,000 Russian troops is not going to make any difference on the battlefield. Just to give you two examples. In 1968, when the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact entered Czechoslovakia, they deployed about 450,000 troops. Okay, now Russia, when it entered Ukraine, which is much bigger than Czechoslovakia, they only had 200,000 troops. So they entered the fight while being significantly undermanned. The Russian forces have taken quite a severe beating from Ukrainians, actually. And while we assess that Russia had about 100 to 120 battalion tactical groups, so let's put it at about 80 to 100,000 combat personnel. Now we assess that about 30 to 40 of these battalion tactical groups, so about 30% of the Russian combat power, is no longer effective or combat effective. And as a result, Russia is trying to rotate these forces back to Russia or Belarus, and they are trying to bring new forces in. The problem for them is that at the moment, they don't have appropriate manpower and equipment levels to actually replace them with one-to-one ratio. Okay. So now Russians have to make a choice of which areas they are going to focus in. And it seems to me that Kiev is not necessarily going to be the main focus area for Russians in the short term, at least.
So again, going back to its focus on the east in the Donbas region, I was speaking just last hour to a Ukrainian member of parliament, and she was actually telling me that as far as she's concerned, this is going to end with a Ukrainian military victory, which would probably have been unthinkable at the end of February when this all began. I mean, do you think that is possible at this point?
What we are also tracking is Russian plans to and ways of how it can mobilize. So far, we haven't seen any evidence that there is a mass mobilization going on within Russia. And certainly, Russia would need to deploy much more combat troops to Ukraine to actually tip the balance. Given that taking over Ukraine is a strategic goal of the Kremlin, I do not really think at the moment that Ukraine can actually win this conflict militarily. Certainly, Russia can withdraw from some areas, but areas, for instance, north of Crimea, around Kherson, and around Donbass, I think Russia is going to try to maintain its presence there, and we'll see what the political settlement, if there will be one, is going to tell us about who should keep these territories, because at the same time, maintaining a presence from the Donbass to Kherson gives Russia this land bridge to Crimea. So this is one of the scenarios that we have also been looking at in terms of what the end goal of Russia could potentially be in this conflict.
So I'm also wondering, because one of the things that we're hearing of late is Russian bombings of fuel depots. This has become a main target. A number of them have been bombed. And I'm wondering what that signals strategically and how much that could debilitate Ukraine, in your view.
So again, Russian forces are rotating in and out. They are battered. They are weakened quite significantly. And in order to hinder the movement of Ukrainian mechanized and armored formations, they are actually hitting, the Russian forces are hitting rear logistics lines, fuel depots, oils and lubricants storage areas. Will this have an effect on Ukrainian military operations? Yes, certainly. But at this stage, it is difficult to assess it's difficult to assess to what extent this will actually hinder the movement. But let's also remember that a lot of Ukrainian capability hinges on Western supplied military equipment. So we are looking at Javelin anti-tank guided missiles, Stingers, or anything that Poland or the entire Western Europe has supplied to Ukrainians. And these things are incredibly effective in this war.